How's that? Hopefully that's better. All right. Well, hopefully the audio is fixed now, and I guess we'll find out. Fabulous. Whew, okay, fixed now. Apologies, I had some problems with feedback and I fixed it too good. What I was saying was apologies for not being available last week. We had a medium-sized catastrophe and no one was hurt, no major structural damage, and we have all of our utilities back, which is great. So could be worse, we're okay. But very busy, as you can imagine, lots of things to do. But this topic comes from a Twitter question, and someone asked, I'm assuming genuinely, what malicious uses of text would be. Like they had never run across the term or they weren't familiar with them. So just to sort of make sure that we're all on the same page, malicious means, you know, bad, hurtful, just sort of bad generally, right? So someone's trying to do something bad, and some of the things that we'll talk about today are not intentionally harmful, but may be harmful. So let's get into it. And I said malicious uses of text a couple times, and I know that we talked about natural language generation in the title, but I think that there's, I don't know, a lot of assumption that, you know, large language models like BERT or GPT-3 or whatever that Facebook one is that we'll talk about a little bit later that they just released. Alexi says, gonna learn everything. We will not. We will cover some of them. And the specific reason that I'm putting this together is for us as engineers and technologists to make sure that this is something that we know about and we think about. And whenever I'm, you know, reviewing a paper or, you know, looking at a new piece of technology, or whenever I'm working on language technology myself, these are things that I consider because text can hurt people. And when we automate things, when we create ways to produce text at scale, it has that potential for harm, and it's something that we need to keep track of as language technologists and know about. So yes, it is not, you know, that, oh, specifically large language models are like sentient and they know things. It's not the case. What they can do is that they can let, you know, bad actors scale and automate existing harmful uses of text. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today, you know, are currently happening, some with, some without large language models. And I mean, obviously, when people are, you know, doing crimes, they don't then go on the internet and be like, hey, by the way, guys, this is this exploit I found. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm hurting people. I mean, I guess white hats do, but not something we can count on. So as technologists, it pays to be paranoid. And today, I hope that we all leave a little bit more paranoid than we were. And I mentioned here that it's difficult to mitigate, and the thing that makes it difficult to mitigate is that it's unpredictable, right? Which is good. That's what makes it usable and useful and opens up new avenues of, you know, good, I don't think the mic's picking that up. There's some construction noises. And what opens up new avenues of research and things that we can do with these models. But the flip side is that it makes it harder to detect as being generated, right? And a lot of the current work, I don't cite it here, but we can talk about it if you're interested. A lot of the current work on detecting whether or not text is generated by a large language model is model specific. So it doesn't seem to necessarily be the case that you can have a general model, language model output detector that works across language models currently. Which means that it's hard to tell, right? They're designed to produce human-sounding, human-looking language, and they're good at it. They're good at it in a way that makes it very difficult to mitigate. And also, to be frank, companies that are serving these models have a financial incentive to get people to use their service. And I'm sure they're not encouraging people. It seems unlikely that any company is encouraging their users to use illegal behaviors, and it's probably against the terms of service, but so is, scraping data from Facebook or Twitter a lot of the time, and people still do it. So yeah, I would love to believe in my heart that every company that is serving language models for any reason is, doing so in the most privacy and socially proactive and responsible way, but that's just not what their incentives are. So I don't think we can trust them, and we're not at the place, we don't have security tools to really mitigate all of these uses. And also, I think it's sort of an open question to what degree we have legal tools to protect users as well. So this is what keeps me up at night. Cheers. I've got some nice soothing tea for this stressful topic. And as technologists, we're sort of the line of defense at the moment, right? When we are thinking about what we build and how people might use it. So onwards. There's sort of three general categories I'm going to talk about today. These are actually in the wrong order, and I'm missing a parentheses, but what can you do when I'm stressed my copywriting gets worse? But the first is annoyance and time wasting, right? So people are just trying to do stuff and it's harder, or people get distracted because of, text. And then we're going to talk about deception, and then we're going to talk about psychological harm. But deception, right, I think is another big thing that people can maliciously use text for. So misleading people, lying to people, making it look like a lot of people are doing something when in reality it's only a couple people. And then finally causing psychological harm, right? So I don't know how common cross-culturally it is, but there is a saying in the US, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And that's just not true, right? Text can absolutely cause people psychological harm, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's start off with annoyance. This is something that certainly is happening in the US. I'm not as sure about other places because I don't live there, but there is has been recently a large uptick in the number of spam text messages. I certainly have gotten more myself. Alexi said it would be interesting to also talk about using bots for political influence. Yeah, we will definitely talk about why political actors might be doing this in a little bit. But text spam, obviously text. A lot of them, my understanding is that a lot of these sort of spam calls and spam texts are being done by, organizations that are not companies. Maybe some of them are, but mostly it's just scams, right? And they're trying to get people's money or people's private information to then get their money, or do fraud of various flavors and types. There's a lot of stuff that the FCC could have been doing and kind of isn't. And as a result, more on the call side, it has become kind of uncommon for people to pick up the phone, at least in the US, due to just the overwhelming volume of spam calls. So there was a point a couple of years ago where I was getting dozens of spam calls every single day and no actual calls from people. And that's an annoyance, but it also has other long-term effects, right? So it's wasting time and resources. Phone lines can only be open to, consumer phone lines can only be open to one call at a time. So if I'm being called by, spam bot 2358, I am not getting, the call from my lawyer that maybe I'm waiting for. And also it erodes trust in modes of communication. So increasingly people are just annoying calls, at least is my cultural perception in the United States. Again, I don't know if this is the same everywhere. And I think the same thing is going to maybe start happening to text. People will just start ignoring them because so many of them are spam. And this, I would say, yes, it's not great, but I wouldn't say this is the worst use of text. But also a very venerable use of text generation, harmful use of text generation is spam. I'm sure we're all familiar with spam emails, and there's been sort of, I'd say we're at a pretty good equilibrium where most email clients can catch them most of the time, but we're certainly not there with telecommunications in the US yet. So that's the annoyance. Not great. People may fall for the scams, of course, and that's not good. But the dangers are always the scale, right? So if everyone is getting 10, the dangers of the neural method is that it takes the existing thing and makes it bigger and faster and cheaper. And this is where sort of the annoyance would come in. Next up is deception, right? So natural language generation being used to produce text that is incorrect and misleading. And sometimes this is unintentional, right? So people don't, the intent is not to mislead people, but it does result in people being misled. So the misinformation is a mistake, right? This is not, Google's not trying to lie to you, probably, but it is resulting in people being misled, right? So I don't know how many of y'all are very familiar with statistics who have done a lot of coursework in it, but the minimum sample size is not just like a number for everything, right? It's going to be dependent on the situation, the rarity of the thing that you're trying to measure, the amount of variation in the population, etc. So if you search for minimum sample size, the fact that you are getting just a result that's like, it's 100 is misleading, right? That's just not the case. And this, of course, is more like extractive summarization than it is, neural text generation. But I'm sure that there is, I know that BERT is folded into Google search, so I wouldn't say that there are no large language models here for sure. And also, even if people are fairly familiar with the technology, they can be misled by it, right? So we talked about this on stream a while ago. Janelle Shane at AI Weirdness does a lot of really fun stuff. And Blake Lemoine at Google, who was at Google, released this statement to the press that this chatbot is sentient, in my opinion, as a priest. And of course, there was a lot of discussion about it and hoo-ha, and I think a lot of people outside the field now have a very incorrect idea about the capabilities of this technology, which is not good. Not a big fan of it. And Janelle here is joking, right? So this is an interview with a squirrel, and the point that she's trying to make here is that these models are, very moldable. The output of these models are very moldable. So if you go in with a presupposition, that's what we call it in linguistics or formal semantics, the model will sort of continue to generate text as if that presupposition was correct. And I think this is a clear example of deception. I think that, I think that Blake Lemoine genuinely believed that this chatbot was sentient. I think he was incorrect, and I think he was unintentionally deceived. And, that is a big danger of large language models in particular, because they're so malleable, because they're so open-ended. If someone is particularly, easily swayed or particularly vulnerable, they may just believe what the model tells them, or get the model, unintentionally get the model to tell them what they want to know or want to believe, and then use that as evidence to continue doing whatever it is that they want to do. And again, that's not, no one who is training large language models, I hope, is trying to train models to do this, but it is an effect of the technology. Alexi says, we've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. Yeah, it's a great example of this, this spam that is so pervasive that it's become sort of a joke on the internet, because everyone is getting these same, fraudulent texts and calls. And I think another example of unintentionally misleading people. So this actually came out fairly recently, I want to say last week maybe. And this is from Meta Research Group, so Facebook, and they have blenderbot.ai, which you can go to and chat with this language model-based chatbot. And as happens when you have an open-ended chatbot and you're folding in user data, it starts to say some wild things. And like, Tay is the canonical example of this. If you're working in language technology, you should know not to do this, but they're doing it as like as a research project. And when you go to interact with the chatbot, there's a little pop-up screen. You have to be like, I know that it'll say some incorrect things, which I'm sure legally they are covered. But the fact of the matter is that that is not how people who are interacting with this chatbot or people who are reading these tweets are treating this conversation as if it were a conversation and as if it represented the internal belief of the system, right? So in this example, the user says, wait, you think Trump is still our president, referring to former President Donald Trump in the United States. And the chatbot says, yes, of course he is. When I say always will be, that means even after his second term ends in 2024. So this is, not true. Not how the US legal system works, but there is, a strong anti-democratic streak, certainly represented on the internet, and rising authoritarianism. And I don't think that Jeff Horowitz is necessarily, this person who did this tweet is necessarily representing this as the belief of the chatbot, but this person definitely is. So this is from AV Club. And it's from last Friday, which was the 12th of August. That was the 12th of August. And the way that this article is written is as if this chatbot, this language model, is an individual that has thoughts and beliefs and social relationships. And this article is sort of discussing like, oh, if you ask the chatbot about Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, it will say a bunch of things about Mark Zuckerberg, and it's being reported as if these are the beliefs of the system. So I don't think this is intentional deception on the part of the Meta team. I do think that it is deception, right? I think people are being misled about these systems and their capabilities. Sanskar, hello, welcome. Alexi says, maybe this is not a problem with large language models, but a problem with us as humans. Yeah, I mean, we have, a strong anthropomorphizing bias. I think this is very well known, very well studied. It's very easy for humans to see. Oh, hey, Hector. Sorry, I didn't see that chat earlier. It's very easy for humans to see human-like things in the world. So if you've ever looked at a cloud and seen a face, or looked at a tree and seen a face, that desire to see humanity in non-human things seems to be just a pretty consistent human trait that we have as a species. And this very much plays into that. To the detriment of the people who are forming false beliefs about these systems. And then we get into intentional deception. So what we've talked about so far has really been sort of discussions where, because of the qualities of the model, people have been misled, but it was not the intention of the people who developed the model to mislead people. Setting aside perhaps some I think that is not the intention of most people. I think some people in this field are irresponsible and cavalier when they talk about models publicly, and they should stop doing that. But, I don't control people. Dinah says, I just asked the Blenderbot if Trump is still our president. He says, yes, he is. Do you like him? Right? Yep, it's trained on user data. And again, not a surprise that it's going to do this. And I think that dovetails nicely into this first bullet point. So intentional deception, this is when people are trying to mislead other people using text data. And so I'm first going to talk about brigading. So this is sort of a general term that I'm using. It mostly comes from sort of Reddit communities, but it's been used in the, the computational social science literature as well to describe coordinated action that is intended to, harm or deceive. And I'll talk about some examples. And then we'll talk about astroturfing. So this one is specifically political actors attempting to misrepresent the body politic. and then impersonation, pretending to be someone you're not. And these are all intentional deception where people are trying to mislead other people online. More specifically, the United States, crazy country. I mean, every country has their foibles. We just also have a lot of money and power and imperialism, so they get magnified. Okay, so this is a little bit older. This is from 2017, but I just wanted to give you an example of brigading. So if you're not familiar with Valve, it's the company that owns Steam. Steam is an online platform for buying video games. It's a marketplace. And there was a coordinated effort by some bots to change the most visible reviews on the page for video game, right? So if you were, trying to get your game to do really well, you might, pay to be like, hey, make sure, the reviews look really good. Or if you were, had a vendetta against a particular developer. This was around the time of Gamergate. If you're not familiar, keep it that way. It's not super delightful to learn about, or don't. I don't know. It's up to you. But so this is an example of coordinated action to change the reviews in an online marketplace in order to mislead people. So this is just an example of brigading. And it's, Steam is a pretty niche online platform, and like video games are fine, but, whether or not a video game sells particularly well or particularly poorly has fairly limited impact on the world. Not to say it doesn't have a very large impact on specific individuals, but when you get to things like Amazon or, I was going to try to come up with a second example, but there pretty much is no other Amazon, right? This enormous juggernaut of commerce that in many places, certainly in the United States, is really the only, retailer to get goods at, right? The basic goods you need to live day to day, particularly in the last couple of years. So this is another example of this, people selling fake reviews. And this is something that mostly so far as I can tell, we only have strong evidence has been done manually, right? So paying people to write fake reviews. This seems to me to be a very dangerous area where, there's also like a lot of spam reviews that are template based, but where neural language generation could be particularly dangerous because it's not always going to be easy for a human to detect the difference between a fake review and a real review if they're written using something designed to sound very, very natural sounding. And that's what the program has been rewarded for. So clear potential, harmful use here. Potential mitigation here might be not allowing any review type language if you're doing API calls, obviously including it in the terms of service, not to generate reviews. I cannot think of benevolent, non-malicious. I cannot really think of any non-malicious reasons to generate large numbers of reviews, except to attempt to mitigate the effect of fake online reviews, which, presumably is something that the model owner should be doing and should not be giving, carte blanche for everyone to do. So, thanks, Lexi. Yeah, so that's the general worry there. Thanks, Dana. I appreciate that. And this is not just for commercial ends, it can also be for political ends. So we mentioned this a little bit. And this is something that was recently done in India. And there is, was a not entirely a bot network. From reading more about this case, it seems like it was a combination of actual accounts and then sock puppet accounts that were run by those accounts. So sock puppets are when you pretend to be someone else online, right? That were mass harassing people, basically. And Yep, it was not great, and also something that if you were trying to automate and scale, which is the scale is the harm here, right? The scale is that, 500 people leave a nasty comment on your post, that, 500 people downvote whatever it is you said. So this is an area where I think the danger of increasing the ease of scaling these type of attacks is particularly dangerous. And again, mitigation here would be detecting and not allowing the generation of abusive language. The difficulty there is that abuse is situational, right? And it's very, very, very hard to detect. And I don't, it's just not a solved problem. So yeah, a potential mitigation measure would possibly be not allowing anyone to generate things that look like social media posts using these tools. But again, difficult to detect social media posts versus other types of posts. Potentially also people could pretend that they were generating narrative text and then get like embedded examples of social media posts and pull those out. So very hard to mitigate. Yeah. So that is, I'm just looking at the chat, see y'all talking. Type of grading. And of course, we know that people have been training models to do this. And even if that is not their explicit aim, it's definitely one potential use of it. And this is, we talked about this a while ago on the channel. I actually did a recorded video. I think it's called like, what could possibly go wrong? Why not to build harmful models? And not to enable brigading is a big reason not to do this. And this is an example where the model is publicly available, has, very intentionally to make it continue to be publicly available, been mirrored a lot. It's very easy to find, and that was the explicit aim of the community that came up around this model, and has clear malicious uses, particularly for brigading, right? It generates hate speech very easily, and if your goal is to generate a lot of hate speech and then serve it to someone at scale, it's possible, and the person who did this knew it was possible and did it, and yep. Anyway, so the likelihood that this is coming is very high. I don't know what the possible mitigation measures are. Certainly social media. Certainly social media moderation would be one great thing if we had that already solved. It's not. It sure isn't. And yeah, I mean, mitigation measures that I can come up with would be knowing about these models, these tunable models, having detection measures in place when people are posting text data to be like, hey, was this generated by one of these known models using one of these known generator detectors? But yeah, if it's been sufficiently tuned, I don't know if it would be possible to get around that. I mean, this is just, I don't know how we avoid this. And I'm telling y'all about it because it's important that we know that it's coming. And if you're working in these areas, that you are considering this in your product design. All right, astroturfing. So if you're not familiar with the term, astroturf is fake grass. So I have some pictures here. That's what it looks like. And the, when I was a kid, just as an aside, when I was a kid, my godparents lived in a trailer, and they had like a little astroturf doormat, is that what that's called, outside their front door. And I thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen, and I spent an inordinate amount of time playing with the astroturf doormat. So it's a word that I have like very fond childhood memories of. But anyway, so fake grass. And astroturfing is as opposed to grassroots. So grassroots is something that comes from the community, that sort of percolates up, that there's a lot of genuine excitement and interest about. And then astroturf is creating a fake version of that. So it looks like there's a lot of interest in community and people involved with it, but there really aren't. And usually it is done for political means. Yeah. Yeah. Alexi says, the points are good, but it looks like people are shouting into the mirror. Machine learning is horrible because people are horrible. But here's the thing. I don't think people are horrible. I think most people genuinely want things to be good and or better. The issue is that people who have the desire to hurt other people, it's the scale, right? The tools are available to do that at a much broader scale and at a much greater potential impact than there were previously. Because you can do everything that I've talked about by hand, right? You can hire a bunch of people to do this by hand, and people do. The harm of natural language generation, I mean, of machine learning in general, is that it's a force multiplier. It lets you do the same thing more. And something that, you know, we need to think about. It's coming. I don't think we can stop it. So how are we going to mitigate it as technologists? What are we going to do about it? And the first step is we have to know about it. We have to know that it's coming. We have to be informed, and we have to, you know, be super paranoid. Like, I hate to keep bringing that up, but that's just the way it is. We gotta, you know, we gotta think about it kind of all the time, so that our users don't have to be, you know, the people who think about it for the first time. Oh. Yeah, absolutely. Dano says, I think a significant problem around NLG is the marketing. So many big companies advertise these bots that do more than they actually do. 100%. I think that as a field, a lot of the people who have a lot of funding have been extremely irresponsible in their public discussion of these models and their capabilities. And the more they do it, the more upset I get. Yeah. Alexi says, why are good things not multiplied then? That's a great question. And I think, you know, to a certain extent they are, right? But I don't think that's a problem, right? Like, it's not an issue if I'm using a machine learning tool and it halves my workload, right? And then I have a bunch of extra time to go do other things. That's not a problem. So I'm not worried about mitigating it. And also, I don't think there's any shortage of people who will talk about how great machine learning and large language models are. Unfortunately, a lot of the, bless them, like, I know why they do it, but a lot of the YouTubers in this space are constantly hyping up, you know, AI and sentience, and it's so great and it's so good. Look at this cool thing. And like, I get it. That's what gets clicks. People don't want to know about bad things, and I appreciate that. But as technologists, it's our job too. So yeah. Anyway, astroturfing. And this is from a publication, like a white paper by the RAND organization, which is a nonpartisan political organization in the US that does, like, I don't know, I'm not super familiar with them, but this report was really good. Talks about potential uses here. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of these. So, you know, we have examples of researchers who are basically able to do the same sort of thing that was being done by hand with GPT-3. I mean, I think that's, you know, kind of trivial that, like, yes, it can be done, but I also think that it's important for us to have those examples to show to people outside the field to be like, hey, this is a worry. Look how easy it was for these researchers to do it. You know, another big problem is genuine fake news, right? So that's a term that certainly in American politics has been thrown around a lot, but news stories that are just not true, and that are produced at large scale to misleading effects. It seems to, so in this discussion, they talk about Xinjiang. I am so self-conscious about my Mandarin. So self-conscious about it. But basically, if you searched for it on social media, that hashtag in social media, you would find a lot of examples of sort of very positive posts, and not a lot of examples or discussion of the genocide that's going on right now. And this is something where a state actor is controlling the larger narrative about what's happening in order to distract, you know, the populace away from what they don't want them to be paying attention to. You know, a huge issue, and a particular, you know, obviously you can create a lot of fake news stories with templates and template-based models. You can have people write them, but something that Renee DiResta brings up is that such technology, so large language models, would help adversaries avoid the sloppy linguistic mistakes that human operators often make, thus rendering the written propaganda more believable and difficult to detect. So in addition to scaling existing harms, it can make the people who are doing those harms more successful at doing them. So I'm not a propaganda researcher. I don't research disinformation or misinformation. Kate Starbird is a really good person to look into if you're interested in learning more about that, but it's probably already happening. We don't have good evidence that it's not. I mean, I don't know to what degree we have good evidence that it does, but also I imagine a lot of people with that evidence are just not going to tell J. Rand, member of the public, about it. So yeah, it's very worrying and very concerning. And I'm sure you all have, I don't know if you've been running into this as well, but if you search for a product, I have found that more and more recently, a lot of the results for a type of product are going to be like top 10 lists that to me read as very clearly generated and that have, you know, Amazon affiliate links in them and that are being used to make money for the people who, you know, who run the top 10 list. And also they may be getting a kickback from the manufacturers that they are talking about being great. So yeah, and that just dilutes the quality of information available to everybody. Music says, ask if the slides are available. They are. I put them on my coffee. One sec. Let me pop the link in the chat for you. I always forget the coffee has a dash in it. I know you can see it on my little screen thing, but it's very, very small for me. Yes. Can I quickly get a link of this? Yes. So they're available online for free because I know that I did... you know, I have a lot of links and references, and I want to make sure that those are available to you. Yeah. Excuse me. One sec, I'm gonna mute. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that. Dino says, this Blunderbot is bad, even its evasive answers are bad. I asked it about the Holocaust, and it said it doesn't talk about politics or conspiracy theories with strangers. Oh, yikes. Yeah, and it's, so there's a discussion about sort of, I'll pop the link to the slides in the YouTube chat as well. Discussion of the history of racism in the United States, which, yep, that is a deep and complex topic. So yeah, hope you enjoy that, Paul. Yeah, and I just as a very quick aside, because we're talking about race, racial categories are 100% socially determined, and anyone who tries to tell you differently and that they are, you know, inevitable in genetic is a eugenicist. That's the definition. So just, you know, keep that in your back pocket. So also talking about political actors, impersonation, pretending to be someone else. Is that how you spell impersonation? It looks deeply wrong to me, but also I'm dyslexic enough that I can't be sure. But anyway, so this is an example where a fake email pretending to be someone else resulted in that person who was a political opponent of the people who wrote the email being detained. Rachel, do you know if this is happening in the US, or like, is the US government doing this as well? I don't know, man. Not that I know of. I'd share it if I knew about it. We just happen to have a lot of examples of you know, the Chinese government doing this. So yeah, so in this case, using this text was this use of text resulted in the loss of liberty of this person, right? They were imprisoned. And the harm here, again, is like, maybe, you know, if you send 3 of them, all 3 people who get them are like, yeah, this isn't real. But if you send 300, maybe a couple of those people think it is real, right? Maybe it's treated as evidence against that person, particularly if it would be, you know, politically expedient for whoever is trying to decide whether or not this person did this crime, that they would have done that crime. So yeah, again, clear harmful use, and one where scale is an issue. So as I mentioned, individual loss of life and liberty, eroded public trust, right? If you can't trust that what is said, is said by other human beings, then you're not going to trust the platform as much, right? So, I don't know what social media platforms you all use, but some social media platforms, I would say the majority of messages are probably automated. And you just don't trust those messages anymore, right? You just don't care anymore. You don't trust the platform. You don't trust that it's going to be a person when you get a notification. General political instability, or, reinforcing of, authoritarian political powers. And then just sort of general crime, threat, fraud, etc. Classic scam, spear phishing. This is really potentially, you can write super personalized spear phishing emails en masse. So again, how do we mitigate against this? Well, we're paranoid. We're just paranoid all the time as technologists, right? Folding in large language model generation detectors into our technology, into spam filters, into, messaging services, all of that. Is that going to be expensive? Yeah. Are we going to have to trust whoever is owning and serving the current, proprietary LLM du jour, that their, mitigation measures are going to be effective enough? Yeah. Are they going to benefit from both the people who are creating the harmful messages in the first place, and also the people who are trying to mitigate those harmful messages? And the greater the volume of harmful messages, therefore the greater need for mitigation, therefore the money they get? Yep. Sure. Yep. Mm-hmm. Am I worried about the perverse incentives of capitalism in this particular situation? You betcha, 100%. Moving on to another topic of psychological harm. I've used some joke examples through here because I think it's helpful to see how people are parodying this, but what they are parodying are real beliefs. So this tweet by Lucas Risotto from April of this year, he claims to have brought his childhood imaginary friend back to life, and it was one of the scariest and most transformative experiences of my life. And I think it's pretty clear that that's a joke. His childhood friend was a microwave who was a war criminal. I don't think this person is being serious, but this sort of genre of discussion is very serious and is very common. And Replica is a company that will happily take your money to create your personal AI friend that's always there for you. And my understanding is that they've been around for a while. You can see the Twitter account was created in 2016. This is mainly done, focus please. There we go. Is that this is mainly done using rule-based and templatic text and pre-written text. I don't know for sure. I don't know their stack. I haven't messed around with their code base. I do not know what technology they are using. But there are people who are trying to benefit from this anthropomorphization of systems. And like I mentioned, if you are particularly vulnerable, if you are particularly prone to believe what is said to you, right? So, people with different mental disabilities, people with, different mental illnesses, just regular gullible people. I am self-aware enough to know that if I weren't in this field and I had what seemed to be a genuine conversation with a chatbot, where, my open-ended questions were answered, in a way that seemed particularly reasonable, I might be inclined to be like, yeah, that's really cool. Maybe there is something to the sentience thing. And it is because I have worked with this technology and I know the underpinnings and sort of why it's doing what it's doing, that I don't have that belief. But yeah, I absolutely could see, the situation where I believed what a chatbot said to me, because I was treating it like a person. And the psychological harm here is like, if you believe that this chatbot is your friend and it tells you something wrong, or it tells you to do something bad, that's gonna hurt your feelings, right? And I realize that that's, well, okay, Rachel, that's not real hurt, I think is something that, a lot of people might respond to that with, but I don't need to tell y'all, folks' mental health is not great right now. Just like at a global level, there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of mental suffering. And if you're turning to one of these things for succor and it hurts you, or it lies, or it maligns people, what's that going to do to you? Probably nothing good. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're like, well, that's just sort of a chatbot thing. So we talked a while ago. I did a blog post. That's what it was. I wrote a blog post and I talked about it on stream about why we shouldn't be doing therapy with large language models. I know some of you were there for that as well. And after that stream, someone reached out to me. I'm not going to tell you who. I don't want to, I don't have permission to share information about who they were, what they were working on, but they were working on something similar. They were pretty far along in their project. They wanted to provide therapy-like support, and their system explicitly encouraged self-harm in the people that it was talking to. And, they showed me a couple of very, very explicit examples of this. And again, if you are in a vulnerable place, if you are turning to this for help and you are told to self-harm, perhaps in a way that you are already prone to self-harming, that's psychological harm. And that could also, very easily lead to physical harm as well. So, I didn't know that. Alexi says a replica was founded by the daughter of some big guy in Russia, as far as I know. I'm not that familiar with that company, because the more I've learned about it, the less I wanted to. And there's not been actually a whole lot of research on the psychological effects of particularly harassment online. So this is, someone gets degraded, what does it do to their mental health? There is this Amnesty report, so from 2018, and from, their, pretty large polling, and they were focusing particularly on women just for this particular, just for this project. They found that, there were really serious psychological consequences to people who had routinely suffered online abuse. Yeah, I agree, Dino. And if the person who reached out to me is watching, I really appreciate that you reached out to me, and I think we came to hopefully a solution that you found both useful and protective of your users. Yeah. And, not to be too much of a downer, but I've been, it may shock you to learn this, but I've been the recipient of coordinated online abuse and harassment because of, stuff I said. And it was awful. It really, really sucked. And as far as I know, it wasn't automated. I think it was all like actual people, looking me up to contact me and tell me how much they hated me, which doesn't make you feel good. Let me tell you that way. And I, it did not change my moral convictions, but it did make me a little warier about speaking out publicly, and it did make me change my day-to-day life to reduce the amount of harassment I was getting, and it's not quite so bad anymore, and I really hope it stays that way, but I am very aware that by talking about issues like this publicly, I am opening myself up to harassment, and that it is kind of not if but when. And that's just like a decision that I've made, and that, I'm taking steps to protect myself as much as I can. But yeah, it's rough. It really, really negatively impacted me at a time when I was already struggling a lot. So yeah, psychological harm. It is real, it is harmful, and language generation has the potential to really, really affect it. So, and then the sort of the general, issues here are, a big one is harm to population mental level health, right? If you have a bunch of bots going around telling people, how horrible they are and being harassing towards individuals, it's not going to be great for the people in society like us. We're people in society. And also, there's a cooling effect or chilling effect where people are going to be chased out of the public sphere. People just won't be, interact with people online. And I, have multiple friends who are not, you cannot find any information about them on the internet because they went to extreme measures to avoid harassment. Because of this. And like, I don't just mean like, I just don't mean like they don't have a Facebook, like basically they don't exist online as individuals, and they made that choice and extremely serious life commitment because of the level of psychological harm that was being done to them. And that's, again, large language models let this scale make it worse. So mitigation, really is on platforms, right? If people can send hateful content on your platform, that's your fault. Like we talked a while ago about Ravelry and how I think Ravelry has done a really good job of creating a community through, narrow use case, not being viciously for profit, right? It's not a large company. It's not a super rich company. I don't think they ever will be. Very, very stringent and stringently enforced moderation from the get-go. And that just continues to be the community standard there. And a lot of social media platforms have just not made the commitment to do that. And I don't see them doing it just because of large language models, particularly because some of the companies that run those platforms also have the large language models. So they would, again, they'd financially benefit from people, paying them to make a bunch of API calls to generate the hateful content to serve on their platform. So anyway, yeah, I did see that they did a particularly bad report, Alexi, Amnesty International. Yes, I agree. That was a mistake. I wish they hadn't done it, but I wouldn't say that that means that everything that they have ever done is automatically suspect. Yep. Anyway, so just to go back to those sort of three categories that we talked about, not in the same order. It was annoyance, time wasting, so things like spam. Potentially people could fall for it. I think most people don't, but I mean, also I don't answer my phone anymore, pretty much period, because of spam. So, it also erodes the utility of communication technology generally. Causing psychological harm, we talked about last, but I put second here. And then finally, deception. And I think a lot of it is unintentional. Ooh, no, go back. Shoo. There we go. I think a lot of it is unintentional. Now you know how I make my slides. I think a lot of it is unintentional. I don't think people are intending to be misled by chatbots when they talk to the chatbots, but it is happening. And a lot of it is very much intentional, right? The brigading, the astroturfing, fake reviews, fake news stories, fake reviews. I've said that twice now. Impersonating people. There's a new scam on Instagram where people will like create versions of popular accounts and then DM people and be like, oh, you should get something for me. And then people think that it's the big creator, but it's really just this scammer. So anyway, these are the issues that I think about the most. There are obviously others, but yeah. Yeah, thanks, Alexi. It was not great, but, I can't control other people. Yeah. Dano says, I also don't answer phone calls for anyone not my contacts. Yeah, same. And of course, the spoofing of calls seeming to be from people in your contacts when they are not, I think is just going to further erode trust in that system. In this case, in the US, I 100% blame the FCC. But anyway, the FCC has not been particularly interested in governing for the last little bit. Anyway, American politics. That is what I've got for you today. Before we wrap up, I want to send a quick thank you out to all of my supporters on Ko-fi. I really appreciate it. It lets me do this. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to do this for a while yet. So thank you so much to everyone who supported me. We will be back on Thursday for our coffee chat where we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. I didn't do it last week, obviously, so it's going to be a double shot coffee chat where we're going to talk about so many things. I'm looking forward to it. And if you would like the links for the coffee chats, if you are my monthly coffee supporter, you get them. So I would appreciate that if you would appreciate the links. Thank you so much for joining me today, everybody. I hope this was informative and it's made you more paranoid. That's my goal. And also you just sort of think about how this interacts with the technology that you're working on, right? Like, when this happens, what are you going to do about it? Before this happens, what can you do about it? And how can we work together to protect our users? So thanks so much for joining me. I will talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you on Thursday.